Color. Here are your priming questions. Color. What exactly do we see? So to give us an idea about color and what we see, the color that we see is actually the color that is reflected. That is what we perceive to be the color of the object. So the wavelengths of light that are reflected off the surface of our mind combine into what we perceive. We might see a single color, but it could actually be a combination of multiple colors altogether that our brain assembles to see as a single color. So, if you think of photosynthesis back to biology, what color is actually not needed for photosynthesis? We'll talk about this in class 2. So your primary colors for color addition, this is for light. These are going to be your physics colors, which we'll talk about in a subsequent video. And so keep that in mind. So we have red, blue, and green. From these primary colors, we can combine them in differing amounts to produce all of the colors that we are able to see. We also have, if you think back to the Roy G. Biv spectrum, we can have individual colors, but our brain, through the use of red, blue, and green light, can combine these in differing amounts to get all of the different colors. These are your primary colors. From here, we have secondary colors, magenta, cyan, and yellow. So if we combine red and green light together where they overlap, we will perceive that as yellow. It's still red and green separate, but the way our brain assembles it together is we will perceive it to be yellow. Blue and red is going to be magenta, and then blue and green is going to be cyan. So these are the secondary colors. From here, we can talk about complementary colors. For us, our complementary colors are any two colors that combine to make white. If you think of what white actually is, white is an equal amount of all three primary colors. And so if we take a secondary and a primary complement, we can get all three colors, and if we were to say that they're all at the same intensity, we can get white light. So magenta, green, cyan and red, yellow and blue. The other way to get white light is simply to have three separate lights, red, blue, and green, overlapping into the same area, and you will perceive that to be white light. So those are the complementary colors. Now, for color subtraction, this is going to be with pigments. What you'll notice here is that we have different primary colors for our pigments. We have magenta, cyan, and yellow. Hopefully this looks familiar. These are the secondary colors from color addition. Now, what we have to be careful of, this is color subtraction. So the idea for pigments is it removes certain colors. So it absorbs those colors. You can think of it as being opaque to those colors as it's absorbing them, and it's not reflecting those colors. So if we perceive something to be magenta, it's magenta because it's reflecting red and blue, which means that magenta is absorbing green. So this absorbs green, which is why we perceive it to be magenta. If we have cyan, if we see it as cyan, we see it because it's reflecting blue and green, which means that it's absorbing red. So a cyan pigment absorbs red and red alone. That's why we perceive it to be cyan. For yellow, we perceive yellow to be yellow because it's a combination of red and green, and it absorbs blue. So a yellow pigment absorbs only blue light, which means that it is able to reflect red and green. Now, our secondary colors for color subtraction are red, blue, and green. These are our primary light colors. And these are when we combine two pigments, we can get these secondary colors. So magenta cyan is blue, cyan and yellow is green, magenta and yellow is red. So to help you understand this a bit more, as you add pigments, the light that is reflected is reduced, which means that it is absorbing more and more light. So this is why we call this color subtraction, because as you add more and more, you subtract more and more colors. So again, magenta is magenta because it is reflecting red and blue, which means that it is absorbing green. Yellow is yellow because it's reflecting red and green, and it's absorbing blue. Now, if we think about it, if we were to combine yellow and magenta pigment, the yellow would absorb the blue from the magenta, and the magenta would absorb the green that the yellow would normally reflect. The only color that is left that is able to reflect is red. An easier way to think of this as a shortcut is simply what color do they have in common, and that's going to be the color that will be able to be reflected. So in this case, they both have red, so it's going to be red. The deeper understanding is because it absorbs the other color, green, and so it's not going to allow the green from the yellow to be able to reflect. And the same thing for the yellow, it's going to absorb the blue, and it's not going to allow the blue to be able to reflect. And so what you're left with is red. Here are your primary questions again. We'll discuss more in class.